We are back, and I think you should actually be able to hear me now. Um, the quality may not be as good just because there's like dual microphones happening, but I hope it works out. So anyway, welcome back. Welcome back, everybody. Instagram, if you could do me a favor and like let me know if you can hear me because we were having trouble a second ago and I think it should be fixed now.
Quality may not.
Yes, it's fixed now. I hear myself. Okay. Hi. Welcome. I'm just gonna do this all over again. We didn't get too far into it, but welcome to the weekly like filmmaker, screenwriter, AMA, Q&A, whatever you want to call it. Any questions that you have about filmmaking, screenwriting in general, please drop them in the comments. We had some people pre-submit some questions, so I'll be going over those later as well. But if we haven't met yet, my name is Jenny. I am a filmmaker here in Chicago, and I have several scripts in production and have been writing scripts since 2020, writing sketches long before that, and doing improv as well. And I love connecting with you all, so I'm so excited for you to spend your Wednesday here. Yay! Awesome. So before we jump into the Q&A, a little topic that I wanted to talk about is just how do we take care of ourselves as writers when we're covering pretty heavy topics? I was working on a script this week that is pretty heavy. Like honestly, it covers like euthanasia and somebody who is considering doing that, and their daughter is trying to stop them. So reading this script over and over and over again and getting back into this character's mindset, like on both sides, like the person who's considering doing it, the person who's like trying to stop the other person from doing it, like being in both of those viewpoints really takes a toll on you as a writer, like because you're thinking about it all the time. You're like, what would they say? How would they act? How would they feel? How do I portray that on the screen? And that can really be overwhelming. So I think it's important to acknowledge that and find ways to come out of a heavy topic like that if you are writing something that could potentially put you down, like take you down, spiral you down, right? So one of my favorite ways to just kind of get back out of that mind space is to take a walk. It's really, really simple. It's not overly complicated, and your solution doesn't have to be overly complicated either. But I love to just like get out of the house, take a walk, remind myself that I am not that character, and instead like get reconnected with the world outside. Other ways I do this is by listening to music, having a little dance party, doing a little like bath, if that's your thing, right? I love to take it because there's something very calming, very grounding about all that. And it's something that we don't think about a lot, is getting into the mindset of the character. It's something we think about as actors. We've seen a lot of actors take on heavy topics and really suffer from that because they got so deep into the mindset of this character. But it's not something we discuss a lot as screenwriters, and I think we should talk about it more. I was writing a script where one of the characters suffers from anxiety attacks, and literally every single time I got to that part of the script, I was experiencing that moment with the character and trying to not only experience it and document it, but like translate it onto the script as well. Like, how can I write this in a way that people would understand what this character is feeling? And to do that, you really go deep, right? Like you really get deep into the script. So it is important to just like constantly take time to check in with yourself, make sure that you're in a good place, and like don't spend a ton of time there. Like don't spend as much time as you need, but take regular breaks, right? Cool. Love that. This is a little thing that I think we should talk about more. If you guys have any questions, about filmmaking, about writing, please drop them in the comments. I am a filmmaker here in Chicago, and I've worked on several sets, can tell you what it's like being on set, how to get into the industry, whatever your burning questions are. Before we get into that, I do want to just say that there were some pre-submitted questions, so let's take a look at that. Okay, formatting. Formatting is always such a big question. And people say, how do I format a screenplay? Listen, there are books out there that are going to teach you how to format. And formatting is important, but it is not the most important thing. Okay? So do not overthink it. There's so much software that's going to like kind of do it for you. Writer Duet is a really great free software. I like to use that. If you have a little bit of money, you're trying to get more serious, of course, like Final Draft is always a great bet, but Writer Duet will do everything that you need it to do. Please do not use Google Documents. I cannot tell you the number of people who've started their scripts in Google Documents and like are hand formatting everything, which is just, it's possible. And I get it. You can do it, but you don't need to do it. And you do not need to spend time doing that. Go to something like Writer Duet. Don't get hung up. Like a lot of people get hung up in like, should I bold my headings? Should I, like bold sounds or not bold sounds or do this or do that? Like there's no reason to get so caught up in all of that right now. What you need to focus on now, if you're an emerging or you're a screenwriter or you're just starting out, what you need to focus on is getting your point across on page in as few words as possible. The more you can say with the fewer amount of words, the better off you're going to be. Because especially if you're like submitting this to festivals or you eventually want to submit it down to producers to get it made, these people are reading scripts all day, right? They're getting hundreds, if not thousands of scripts every single week. And they really, really, you need to really capture their attention as quickly as possible. And if you can say a sentence in 5 words instead of 20, it's better for you. I definitely want to say like, I'm going to go ahead and mute this. Sorry, I'm getting some notifications. I get distracted if I get notifications on my phone. So basically it's great if you like, if you can eliminate words. For example, she is sitting at a desk drinking a glass of water. That's a lot. That's what a lot of people would say, right? That's like the first thing. They're trying to establish the character, what they're doing, what's happening. Okay. Instead of saying she's sitting at her desk drinking a glass of water, you can bring that down to she sits at her desk and drinks water. It's fewer words, it's the correct verb tense, and it gets your point across just as clearly as anything else, right? I think Abraham Lincoln was the one who said it best, where he said he rewrote the Gettysburg Address multiple times because he just kept trying to cut out the fat and kept trying to say like what doesn't need to be there. And that's the same thing you can do with your script. And we kind of took like a little turn from formatting, but it's more like focusing on that will get you so much further than wondering exactly how to format a flashback. Because you can always get an editor, you can always get somebody to read it, you can always get somebody to change the formatting if necessary. But the thing that's most important is having a good script. Okay? Having a good idea, having a good script is the number one thing. So how do you do that? Like, what is the first step to getting a good script? A lot of times, newer writers get very precious about their idea. And they don't want to talk about their idea. They don't want to share it because they're worried that somebody might steal their idea. And I get it, right? If you get something, I have ideas that I don't want to share because I do think they're $1 million ideas. And until they're more developed and I have something like a little more concrete, I'm not going to just go around telling everybody this idea. But ideas are a dime a dozen. It's not the idea that sells, it's the execution, and it's the entire story of it. So in order to have a really good script, you start with your idea and you work on execution. And I love a character-driven script. It's my favorite. a character-driven script is the way that I think we really get to the heart of a story and tell a story that reflects people in a certain moment of time, living a certain way, facing a certain conflict. And having that be the story is, for me, is so much more exciting than maybe a story-driven or an action-driven script, which can be cool and entertaining. You see buildings explode and people fighting and stuff, but that only gets us so far. We still need to know who these characters are, what their goal is, why they can't achieve that goal, and how they change at the end of your script. Assuming you're writing a feature, a short, or something, how do they change? So that overarching journey, right? So I'll say it again. Like, who is this person? What is their goal? Why can't they get that goal? Like, what hurdles, what obstacles do they keep like encountering? And how do they change? This is why people tune in and watch a movie and are changed and really care about your characters. If your character doesn't have a want or a need, they're really going to fall flat, and they're going to end up being a very passive protagonist as to somebody who is more active. Passive protagonists are the every person, right? They don't have a point of view. They don't make choices. Life's kind of happening to them. They get thrown into this universe or this parallel thing that's happening, and then they don't like move the story forward. Life kind of happens to them, and it's not that interesting to watch. And we kind of wonder why they're the hero of the story, because they're not really making decisions, they're not really taking action. And I think that that's something that's super important to think about when you're making your first protagonist, your characters, is like, what is their point of view? And give them a very strong point of view. It doesn't have to be a good point of view. They don't have to be a lovable character or a likable character. Take Shameless, for example. I just started Shameless. I know I've been in Chicago for a while, and I probably should have seen it before, but hey, you know what? Better late than never. Here we are. So in Shameless, every single character has a very strong point of view, and they do not deviate from that. And that is why people tune in week after week to see how these people overcome their obstacles, overcome what's happening to them. And because we understand who they are, we kind of know. So like, if they can't pay an electric bill, we know the Gallaghers are gonna like round up some kind of way to make that happen, right? We know that that Frank is probably gonna owe somebody money. He's not gonna have the money, and he's gonna have to figure out how to get the money, and he's gonna do it in a very frank way, saying very frank things. I think that his name is kind of a double meaning because he has no filter, but hey, that's fun. But we know who these characters are, and that is what makes it so special. So if you're kind of like wondering like what that is, like what does it look like to have a strong character point of view, definitely check that out. And every single character also has a want and a need within the frame of the story in its entirety, even if we're not like looking at that week over week, if we're not exploring that every single week, because like it's a pretty big ensemble cast. Great. I have some more questions coming in. Okay, so two main protagonists. Great. So the question is, what do you think of screenplays that handle two main protagonist stories in one screenplay? You're really looking at like an ensemble then, right? So even like Wicked. Wicked has two main protagonists, and we see both of their viewpoints, and they interact with each other, and they cross paths, but their paths are also changed from being with each other, right? Each character still has their own wants, goals, needs, they're fully developed, and they still make decisions. So even if there are two protagonists, they are still making decisions. And their decisions aren't just affecting them, they're affecting everybody around them. So it is definitely possible to have both people. And if you're having both protagonists, you're gonna have to like fluctuate screen time between the two of them, because they're not gonna both be in every single scene. every single time. You're going to see like a little bit of background on one and a little background on the other. It's just like a nice like little balance, but they're usually still kind of fighting the same antagonist, right? So the same antagonist is pushing them forward, driving the story, or like creating the conflict. And they still have their own individual wants and needs. They could even think that even if they have the same goal, they might think getting there is different. So they're having their own internal or their own conflicts with each other as well. So it's just something to keep in mind, and it's fine. You can have multiple protagonists. It's just a matter of making sure that they're still individual people with their own wants and needs. It's a good question. It's great. Let's see. We have a couple more minutes left. I know I got a little bit of a late start because of some technical issues, but yeah, if anybody has any other questions, please drop them. I will say there have been some great events that I went to this week in Chicago. And if you are trying to go to film events in Chicago, whether they're screenwriting, networking, premieres, whatever it might be, head on over to my Instagram, which is Jennie, Jennie from Any, if you're not already there. If you're already there, you can go to the broadcast channel, which is the Chicago Film Events broadcast channel, and you will find out all the information for the upcoming events happening in Chicago. And if you have an event that you want to submit, let me know and I'll send you a little form. It's great, it's free, and just kind of like lets people know about what's happening, what's going on, which I think is so important. Building community and building network in the Chicago world. Because, like, listen, films do not happen in a silo. They absolutely do not. It's absolutely about networking and meeting with people. Great. Okay, cool. So this little follow-up question from Media by Everrado. Sorry, there's no spaces, so I was trying to put them in there. Just a follow-up to that question that you asked before, which is to expand on the idea of two protagonists. What if the characters are far away from each other, but they cross over in the middle? But they have two different antagonists with the same goal. I think I would really need to talk more about that, because if they have two different antagonists, they're in two separate places. They have the same goal with that sounds like two different stories. In my like just from what you're writing, that sounds like two separate stories, and it might be difficult for us to really follow and attach to a singular person if we're telling two very separate stories. I mean, it's even in, like, take the lake house, for example. Those two characters aren't even in the same time, but they're still connected because they're interacting and their actions affect each other. So I'm not saying they have to, like, be in the same place, but, like, they still have the same goal. Like, their story is still intertwined and connected. So if you are having multiple protagonists not in the same area with different antagonists, you've got to look at the connecting thread and make sure it's really there throughout the script, so that we're not telling two different stories, but rather one whole story with maybe like multiple players in it. Does that make sense? I like these questions, so you're welcome. Of course. If you ever want more, feel free to DM me as well, especially if you like don't want to send specifics over the comments. I totally get it. But you can send me a DM, or we can set up a time to chat if you really want to dive into it. Would love to do that. Just let me know. Yeah. Awesome. Well, I am going to jump off because I have a writer's room happening in about 30 or less than 30 minutes, about 20 minutes, where we meet every single Wednesday online to just like talk shop and it's more interactive. People talk about their ideas, we springboard ideas off of each other, and that happens virtually. And so if anybody wants to know more about that, you can head over to scriptslay.com. And I look forward to chatting with you all next week as well. Hopefully the mic situation on Instagram isn't too bad, because I know that we had some issues. But thank you guys so much for spending time with me today, and I can't wait to see you all next week. And remember, your story matters,